Hey guys, we are going to cover some of the documentation process that you need to do here. Um, we have to do a dimension drawing of each of the individual parts. Now, if you're repeating a part more than once, you only have to make one dimension drawing for that. But you do have to do each individual part, and if you have multiple assemblies, you have to do each individual assembly. So in the case of mine, I have one assembly that is the two parts of this handle attached to the axle and my axle end. I did that as a sub-assembly. So I'd have to have a dimension sub-assembly as well as the individual parts, and then have the assembly of the entire automata itself. Now my automata is pretty large, and I've got a couple extra parts on here that you guys don't have. I have these connectors because I do not have a back, so you can see all the way through my automata, which makes it better for me to demonstrate to you guys how to do some of these stuff in the real world. So let's just go ahead and get started. So I have my assembly open. I want to start by doing some of the dimension drawings. I'm going to start out doing this follower top right here. So let us open up a new curly title block, and let's fill out this. Okay, so I put in my title, my designer, the sheet number. I don't know what my scale is going to be yet, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank. And it's going to open up my curly title block page for me, and I'm going to place my base part. Now, this is the thing that I just had originally open. I don't want to do that yet. I want to do my round topper. So we're going to start out. Now, I've got most of my information in here, but my scale isn't in there, so let's go ahead and fill that out. Remember, it is under the curly title block in your browser bar under field text, and you can just type it in and make any changes to anything if you made misspellings or you need to change the sheet number. Hit OK. Now let's do some dimensioning. For the most part, this is a pretty straightforward dimensioning. I am going to dimension the diameter of the circle. I'm going to put in my depth of the circle because I know that. And then I am going to add in my center mark. Remember, always put in your center mark. And because this hole goes all the way through, and it's a hole, I'm going to use the hole tool and just hover over it, and there it gives me the diameter, and it specifies its depth. Now, the other dimensions that I have in here are inside. There's a hole that goes up through it for the peg to sit, for this to sit on a peg. I would have to dimension to hidden lines, and we do not like to dimension to hidden lines. So let's make some changes and add in a section view. So I'm going to go ahead and go back over to my Place Views tab, and I'm going to hit Section, and I want to do my section view on this side view right here. So I'm going to hit Section, and I'm going to choose this view, and then I am just going to draw my line between it, and right-click and hit Continue. And then it's going to give me my section view outline. Now I can decide whether to place it on the right or the left. It's a little bit crowded on the right, so I'm going to go ahead and put it on the left. And what you're not seeing here is this dialog box is popping up. All right, so it's asking me, how do I want to identify it? I can make it a smaller scale if I would like to. A couple other options to cut edges. I'm just going to put it right here, and it's going to call it section AA because we've got the letters AA and the scale of 2:1. Now, right now I've got some of my annotations, the section view name, like running over into my title block, and I really don't want that, so I can move that. If you hover over any view, you can see how the cursor changes. It's got, I don't even know how to describe it, this little thing next to it. If I click and hold, it will allow me to move the main view and all of the associated views up. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that to get all of this writing out from underneath. And then also I'm going to move my isometric up a little bit because that A was running to it as well. Now what I can do is just go ahead and finish my dimensioning. I'm going to go back to annotate, and I'm going to specify how wide that was and how deep this is. Let's get it right from the middle here. Okay, so there, I finished all of my annotations. Now guys, if you remember, If you double click on a annotation, a whole annotation, I can go to precision and tolerance, and I can change my unchecked use global, and I want to change it up to 3 decimal places. Apparently it's not going. There we go. I changed it up to 3 decimal places, and you can do the same thing for any of these others to get the number of decimal places that you want. I used a lot of 3 decimal places in some of my actual dimensioning, so I'm going to change it to 3. And there we go. Last thing I want to do is I'm going to change this view to be more 3-dimensional. So I'm going to right click and go to edit and change it to this one here on the end, the shaded view, and hit OK. And there, it looks more 3-dimensional. There, my object is fully dimensioned. I know the diameter of the entire object, how deep it is to extrude it. Ooh, it's not fully dimensioned. I know how large this hole is in the middle, because actually it is fully dimensioned. Because it's on the center mark of the center mark, I know it's right in the middle. And then I know how big to place, or how deep this hole is, what its diameter is, and I should just add in a center mark to that so that it's right there in the middle. Okay. So I'm fully dimensioned. There's the first sheet done, and that's just for parts. So now I've done my individual parts, assuming you've done them all, and I'm ready to go on to the next thing, making my full assembly. Don't forget to change your sheet name to something that's a little bit more useful. I'm just going to call this round topper, just like the object is. Now, let's right click and add a new sheet, fill in your information. Okay. Now let's add in our assembly view. And again, because I have my assembly already open, it's happy to just add that one in. Here's a difference, guys. You do not need to do all 3 views for your assemblies. You only need to do enough views that allow you to see all the parts. In our case, a front view is going to be enough detail that we can see all of the parts. So you don't have to try to cram in many views. So I'm just going to put on my front view, and I'm going to leave it about this size. I know you're going, oh, there's lots of room around it, and there is, but we're going to end up using it all up. So I'm at quarter scale, and I'm going to hit OK. Just don't forget to go add in your initial scale. You want all of this information filled out. If you turn one in and there's information not filled out on the title block at the bottom, you are going to lose points. So ensure that you fill that all out. Now the next thing we're going to do, guys, is we're going to be adding balloons to all of the parts to give them a number so that we can reference them. And this is very easily done. Again, we're going to go back to annotate, and you're going to see an option here of either balloon or auto balloon. Choose auto balloon, and this dialog box is going to pop up, and we're just going to follow the instructions. So the first thing we want to do is select a view. We only have one view, so just hover over it until you get the red dots. Click on that. If it wants you to say save, go ahead and save it. Again, we clicked on our view. Now it's telling us down here in the corner, where when it doesn't say press F1, what our instructions are. There you go. See, it says select components for ballooning down at the bottom. The easiest way to do this is to select all of your components. So over here, you're going to click with the left mouse button and drag and highlight everything. They should all turn a different color. I think default is green, but it depends on your settings. If they're all highlighted, you've got them all. Now we want to choose our placement of our balloons. I do not like to have them all underneath, horizontal, or next to it because it gets really crowded. I like them to go around. This is a personal preference. And then the balloon shape you can choose. I like this first one, the circular. After you have all of that, right click and hit continue. Now this is the placement of how the balloons are going to be. And you can scroll in and out a little bit to see how they'll move. Like this would be horizontal. You see the problem, there's too many. This would be vertical. Again, there's too many. So I go with around is what I like. You can move them out a little bit. I wouldn't move them out too far. And then click again, and it's going to draw all your arrows in. And then you can go ahead and click apply. If you get this message, just say okay. and then you can close this box. So here we are, guys. We have been given a balloon number for each individual part. Now we're going to do a little bit of tweakage here because we've got balloon numbers crossing into odd places. Like right here, number 12 is pointing to this thing over here, but it's drawing a whole line through. We can move these balloons around. You just have to hover until your mouse turns into that 4 arrowed thing that's next to your mouse. Click and drag, and you can just move them around so that they are in a better placement. Now don't move them like out here or in close. You see how they're all kind of in a line, in a line, in a line. Keep them neat. I'm going to scroll in just a little bit so we can see some of the other things that I don't particularly like. So right here we've got this arrowhead crossing over 2 parts to point to this, and these guys are really crowded. So I'm just going to move them as such, and then I'm going to move number 23 over here and move number 27 right there. So Inventor does a fairly good job of making this kind of organized, but it's not perfect, and you can tidy this stuff up. Now number 21, it looks like it's pointing to the middle of the cam here, but it's not. It's actually pointing to this follower. So you can move the arrows themselves. So I'm going to just, it's a little bit tricky sometimes, but I'm going to move the arrowhead down here so that it's pointing to the actual follower, not just to the inside of this follower top. So try to make that as neat as possible. Here's another one that's kind of screwy. We've got number 3, and it's pointing way over there. Let's just move it in a little bit. Now, if you have questions about what these numbers mean, this is the next thing that you're going to have to do. We are going to make a parts list. So a parts list is just going to create a list of all of the parts along with the numbers that they've already been assigned. So just choose parts list. Make sure that you have the right part. In this case, we are doing our automata. And go ahead and click OK. And you're going to get this, in my case, this monstrous box. All right, go ahead and click all right. It's going to cover over your automata sketch right now, but we're going to fix that. So if I just double click on anywhere in this table, the dialog box comes up. I don't need all of this information. I don't really want a description box, so I'm just going to right click and go to table layout, column chooser, and I'm going to unchoose or remove that column. I didn't need description. When you hit apply, you see it goes away, and I'm good with the rest of that. We can drag these over. We don't need these columns to be quite so large so that we have a little bit more space over here for our numbers. Now look, number 1 is the bottom. Here's number 1, and it's pointing to the bottom. This is how you know what these parts are actually meaning. And you'll see in some cases, I'll have multiple instances of a part, like the side. I have 2 sides. It's only numbering them once. It's not numbering it twice. But now let's look at number 2, which is my side. It doesn't really look like it's pointing at my side. It looks like it might be pointing at this part or this part. So I'm just going to drag my arrowhead down a little bit to make it clear as to what it is pointing to. So you'll have to do a little bit of wiggle to get things where you want it. That number 20 is pointing to the follower cap, but it's right there on the edge. So I'm just going to bring it up a little bit so it's very clearly pointing to the follower cap itself. If you look at number 23, it says big rotational follower. This is actually a sub-assembly, so I'm going to change that name. So all you have to do is double click anywhere in the table and it brings up this parts list again. And then here I want to rename it, and I'm just giving it big rotational follower assembly so that I know, or anybody else that's looking at my parts list, that this is actually an assembly, not just an individual part. And again, you can just kind of drag things around to get the size columns that you need for your information. And it looks like I hit. I guess I didn't. I thought I hit enter after it, and that's why we're getting that extra space. Apparently I did. So there we go. So you can change names, you can move arrowheads, you can move numbers around, make everything as tidy as possible. And guys, that's how you do an assembly annotated drawing. You don't have to dimension the assembly. Please do not dimension the assembly. You just do something just like this. If you have questions, let me know.